Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Weiss. I'm the chair of the tax section. I'm a tax attorney at Holt, Slavin and Drapkin. Thank you so much for joining us today for our program on exiting California. I am leaving, but where should I go? But before we get into that, I want to thank our section sponsor, Hockman, Saltzman, Tasha, and Perez. They've perennially been our staunch supporters, and we appreciate their support of the section. We are going to get started today. You will receive your MCLE credit certificates after the program is over. If you have questions for the presenters, please put them in the Q&A, which you have access to, and we will have questions and answers at the end. Each of the presenters is going to spend approximately 15 minutes talking about their topic, which is different states. So we're discussing exiting California. I am leaving, but where should I go? Everyone on the panel is an experienced tax attorney, and we appreciate their time for participating in this panel. First, we'll have Matt Saltzman, who will speak from Las Vegas, who will speak about what it's like to move to Nevada. Then Coleman Jackson from Coleman Jackson in Dallas, Texas, will speak about Texas. We'll then move on to Bill Norman over at Norman and Zach in Santa Monica, but he is also admitted in Wyoming, and he will speak about moving to Wyoming. And then Alan Gassman from Gassman, Crotty, and Denicolo in Clearwater, Florida, will speak about what it's like to move to Florida. And finally, Howard Fisher from Fisher & Fisher here in Beverly Hills, California, will talk about exiting California. And so, Bill and Howard, I want to hand it off to you, and we'll move on to the program.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, Howard and I put together the kind of theme of this program. We've all heard lots of programs about how hard it is to give up California residency or abandon California residency, but not much about where you go if you're actually giving up your residency or domicile in California. So we kind of turned this program around, and we're going to talk about where you might go. And we picked some states where just in our on our practice, we've seen clients want to go and actually have gone to these various states. Some, almost all of them, I think, have various attractions that for people who are in retirement, have large capital gains, just want to work remotely, like to ski, all kinds of reasons like sunshine. And I like the work environment. So that's kind of the purpose of this. I don't know, Howard, do you have any opening comments you want to say?
Sure. As time goes on, more and more people are starting to flee California. We've now had 2 consecutive census periods in a row where there's been a decrease, most recently a couple of weeks ago. People are moving out of California. And most importantly, it's who's moving out of California, who's moving in. We're losing the people in the top 5 and 10% tax brackets, and we're gaining in the middle and the bottom. So from just an economic standpoint and a brain drain, California is going to become a less attractive place. And with the ability to work remotely, there's becoming less and less reasons to be here. And you have some of these states that we're going to hear from other people today are really great places to be. So,
okay, thank you. So let's start off with the Matthew Saltzman and here's some remarks about the great state of Nevada.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with the Beverly Hills Bar Association and talk about Nevada. My name is Matt Saltzman. I'm an attorney here at the Saltzman, Mugan, Dushoff law firm in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I've been practicing law in Las Vegas for 25 years. Like almost everybody in this state, in this city, I came from somewhere else. In my case, it was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, originally from the Northeast. So I have some perspective on how unique Las Vegas and Nevada is as a state and as a place to live, coming from one of those back east places. Definitely, we've seen an incredible amount of involvement of Californians fleeing and coming to Nevada, among other states. It's been a phenomenon here for a while, and it's really accelerated in some ways I'll touch upon during this presentation. My primary practice is in administrative law. I represent banks, do a lot of work with trust companies and forming family trust companies, private trust companies, and retail trust companies in Nevada, as well as all types of hospitality law, particularly food and beverage and alcoholic beverage and everything touching our economy here. And I'm going to go give you some highlights of what it is about Nevada that's different. You know, I read all the things that are written from people in California like Victor Davis Hanson and Joel Kotkin talking about California demography and culture. And we really have a dramatic contrast in our state's cultures. We're so close to each other and yet so different. I'm going to try and bring up my little PowerPoint here, and hopefully that will come up for you. Is my Leaving California for Nevada PowerPoint up?
Yep.
Okay.
We can see it, Matt. Yeah.
There we go. So we have a booming, dynamic state that's growing very quickly. When I got here in 1996, 1997, the state had just passed 1 million people, or in Southern Nevada, 1 million people. And now within 9 years of that, there was 2 million. And the growth has been just unprecedented. It's an incredible thing to have lived through and experienced as a lawyer, to have the amount of development and new businesses here is just incredible. Things that maybe San Francisco experienced in the post-Civil War era of New York or LA between 1950 and 1960. This is what we experienced just recently, and we're in another really booming wave. There's just a very favorable environment here. Now, where are people moving to from California? Well, we're seeing generally Southern California comes to Southern Nevada, and Northern California and the Bay Area has a predilection for Northern Nevada, which is Reno and Lake Tahoe. And there's a little town up there called Incline Village, which is an extremely nice place on Lake Tahoe on the Nevada side. And it's a very, one of the most affluent little parts of the United States tucked in there. There's a lot of cryptocurrency refugees and people who have moved to Nevada to be in the cryptocurrency world, live in that part of the state. There's a lot of activity up there. I'm in Las Vegas, and our whole, almost the entire state is in this area of population down at the bottom here between Henderson and the city of Las Vegas and Clark County, all one big metropolitan area. Our tax system is the #1 driver of activity here for refugees from other states. We have no personal income tax and no corporate income tax. I was joking to myself, I could just repeat that for 15 minutes and that would be my presentation on why Nevada is an attractive place to come to from California. Not only are there no income taxes, no estate tax, no capital gains tax, we don't fill out tax returns personally in the state of Nevada, none of that. But there are some taxes that are important. A brief comparison between Nevada and California shows us some of the differences. It's not surprising that California ranks down at the bottom. We're close to the top here. There are business taxes that businesses have to pay. I think they're pretty nominal. They've been the subject of a lot of bitter debate and antagonism here in the past 10 years since they've been rolled out. The first is the commerce tax. This is the newest one. It was actually put in place by a Republican legislature and a Republican governor, much to the shock and dismay of many of us in the business community, but it is only effective on gross revenue of businesses above $4 million. So most of the small mom and pop and smaller businesses probably wouldn't even be subject to this tax. The rate on that gross revenue, it depends on the types of businesses. Financial institutions pay a higher rate than other types of businesses. There is a large amount of categorization and separation between the different types of businesses and what they pay, but the rate is between 0.051% and 0.331%. So in a lot of respects, it's negligible, but it's something that was above zero, and it was a very bitterly disputed thing when it happened 7 years ago. We have a modified business tax in Nevada on payrolls, and that is 1.378% of a payroll. And that's if you have more than about $50,000 in payroll. There's a lot of deductions and offsets regarding whether you offer health insurance to your employees. But those two taxes really comprise almost all of the, I'll call income-based or revenue-based taxation in the state of Nevada that are attributable to almost all businesses. How can Nevada offer such low taxes? And again, no personal income tax. It's because the gaming business, casinos and resorts do have a business income tax based on their gaming revenue. And that's a little under 8%. And that funds a very large amount of the state's budget. So there really is a business tax here. It's just all on the gaming side. We have unemployment and workers' comp, as you do in California. You can see in this slide, the unemployment contribution, 2.95% of wages paid, up to about a $36,000 limit per employee. And the workers' comp is 94 cents per $100 in covered payroll, which is again about $36,000 per employee. I have a little comparison to California there. So for workers' comp, you could see 161 per 100 compared to 94 cents per 100. That's a very significant difference right there. We do have what I would consider a higher sales tax, about 8.5%. It's all based on add-ons from localities on top of a modest state rate of 4.6%. But we generally ballpark a little here over 8% for our sales tax. Property taxes, we've had something similar to what California did. I wouldn't say it's the same as Proposition 13, but we did have a rapid increase in real estate values in the 15-year ago period where there was the inflation in housing prices. Because of that, there was a cap in the increase of assessed values that could be subject to property taxes. We have had a huge increase in real estate values in the past year, 2 years. So as a practical matter, if you're ballparking what a house in Las Vegas, what you have to pay in property taxes, it was about 0.8% of fair market value per year. Now with the rapid increase in these caps and collars and limits that were in place from 15 years ago, it's probably close to 0.6 to 0.7% of fair market value is what you'd pay on your beautiful home here in Nevada. Housing prices have gone up incredible amounts by our standards, probably comparable to other places, 30%, 1 year change in Las Vegas. That's a 25 to 30% in Northern Nevada. I think things are rapidly cooling off. We're hearing about many fewer offers on houses here because the mortgage rates are increasing. We'll see how that plays out. But for now, we're still in the mode of an increase in real estate values. There is tax abatements for some businesses. It's not something that's talked about a lot here like it is in other states. Most businesses want to relocate here without regard to the abatements, but the big ones, the Teslas, the Fisker electric car company, the big solar utility companies, they're getting abatements based on the number of employees they have, the wages that they're paying. So it is something that is available to the larger relocatees into Nevada. From a trust law standpoint, the most attractive thing we have is our asset protection trusts. The fiduciary service business in Nevada is a big business. It's one of the only places I've ever seen, other than the Turks and Caicos Islands on a trip a long time ago, where you have billboard advertisements for trusts and lawyers who do trust work. You don't see that most other parts of the United States, but if you get off the plane at Harry Reid International Airport, as it's now called, you'll see advertisements as you walk to the baggage claim for trust services. The zero income tax environment's very attractive. We also have a self-settled spendthrift trust under our state law that allows a grantor to benefit from the creditor protections of a spendthrift trust with a very short 2-year seasoning period for transfers, and also protection against claims of spouses and child support, which all together place us in one of the most attractive jurisdictions in the country for asset protection. There are a lot of trust companies here. Most of the trust companies in Nevada are serving residents of other states. Now, to establish residency here, there is very little in our state law that defines that, because we're happy that people come here and we don't certainly fight anyone who leaves, unlike California, who I understand can be very bitter and acrimonious in fighting people who leave. In this slide, you can see we did place what the California revenue people look for to determine if it's a bona fide relocation to Nevada or other states. And there's a whole totalities of circumstances looking at religious institution membership, where your kids go to school, where do you go to the doctor and dentist, et cetera. But I will tell you in the legal community in California that we do have a statutory procedure that I never have heard anyone take advantage of. where you can file a declaration in the state of Nevada publicly, and it's sworn statement saying that you're a resident of Nevada. If people are interested in moving here and really making Nevada their home and trying to put up protections against claims that they're not truly a Nevada resident, I'd recommend that they look at filing that affidavit and taking advantage of this ability to make a public statement and creating that higher level of evidence that they've truly declared Nevada as their residency. We have very modest residency requirements for all privilege licenses. Even the in-state tuition for our universities only requires 12 months of residency prior. And I think this is on the good side of things. Living in Nevada, there is a marked difference in cost of living. The housing prices have gone up, but they haven't gone up as much as other states, and they're still very affordable compared to other parts of the country and in California. Recreational opportunities, we're rapidly becoming a sports city. The Raiders are here. The Oakland A's are on the cusp of making a decision whether to relocate to Las Vegas. We have now a hockey team, which is hugely popular. In addition to the sports, we have all sorts of outdoor recreational things that no one really thinks about, because all they think about is the inside of a casino. Lake Tahoe, incredible, vast areas of emptiness to explore in the middle of the state. And of course, all of the urban amenities, entertainment that can't be matched anywhere in the world. Starting a business is a very simple and quick thing to do here. We can get a new company set up in a day or even a few hours. We do that all the time in business transactions. We do have, I think, relatively benign laws regarding labor and employment. The overtime, 40 hours or 8 hours in a day. We do have at-will employment here, and and non-competes are pretty pro-employee rather than employer, generally speaking. I know we have a limited amount of time for each of these states, so I'm just going to conclude. It's a booming state. Enormous amount of people are moving here now. The difference is, in the old days from California, we saw a lot of middle-class people, maybe lower middle-class people and tradespeople coming here, the so-called plumbers, electricians, people to work in lower skilled jobs during our first boom. And in the pandemic period, we're seeing a lot more affluent professionals doing the relocation to work remotely. The high-end real estate market has been mostly affected by these very wealthy people, or people who've just sold their homes in Beverly Hills, Brentwood, Pacific Palisades, et cetera. They can buy a beautiful home here, telecommute, maybe go back and forth to Southern California here and there as needed. The private schools are flooded. There's waiting lists. California license plates are everywhere. If you have any questions on anything having to do with Nevada, here's my contact information, and feel free to contact me either through the questions in this presentation or directly to the email in the slideshow. Thanks for having me present to you.
And thanks, Matt. Did you pick a popular song for Nevada?
Viva Las Vegas is the absolute ultimate song about the energy, the positive energy, about everything about Las Vegas. It's a song I played when I took my job here in 1997 from Pittsburgh, leaving the cloudiness and gloom for the bright blue skies and the smell of new cars.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next we're going to move to the great state of Texas. We have Coleman Jackson from Dallas. So Coleman, take it away.
I try to share my screen here first. I hope that worked. My name is Coleman Jackson, and I am the managing shareholder of Coleman Jackson Professional Corporation. We are a taxation, litigation, and immigration law firm based in Dallas, Texas. And I thank the Beverly Hills Bar Association for giving us the opportunity to present at this webinar. And I also I'm thankful to the attendees of this webinar. You should have received my entire PowerPoint as a part of your package with the bar. And if you happen to be listening to this webinar because you found us on the internet months from now, or 2 months from now, or a year from now, you can always write our law firm, go to our website, www.cjacksonlaw.com, and just request a copy of moving to Texas presentation, and we will send it to you free of charge. Now, moving to Texas. Texas has many expressways.
Coleman, can you please go into full screen mode for your PowerPoint? So it'll blow it up more. In the bottom corner, bottom right. That should do it. I think. No, your slides are small. Or you know what? Click on the slide.
Better now?
There you go.
All right.
You got it. It's fine. That's
Okay.
good.
Sorry about that. Okay, moving to Texas. Texas, as I was saying earlier, has many expressways. Now, considering as you contemplate moving to Texas, or your family or your clients contemplate moving to Texas, imagine there's 2 expressways. Expressway number 1 is named Texas is one of the lowest tax states in the nation. That's expressway number 1. Texas is one of the lowest tax states in the nation. And we're going to indicate why that is so during this presentation. The second expressway that I want you to contemplate driving on when you leave California or whatever state you're in to move to Texas is this highway. Highway number 2 is named Texas has many wide open spaces, not just geographically. You can stand in one place in Texas, look north, south, east, or west. And as far as the eye can see, there are wide open spaces. Now consider that also as in terms of opportunities. And as we go through this presentation, we're going to be looking at how Texas is financed. Look beyond what is right in front of you, and you can see many, many industries and opportunities to work in Texas, to start a business in Texas. So keep these 2 expressways in mind as we travel down this these expressways moving to Texas. Now, Texas, let us start with Texas Constitution. The Texas Constitution states that in Article 8, taxes and revenue, that all taxes are to be equal and uniform. Now, moving on to our slide number 2, moving to Texas, an overview of a few laws and things you need to know about. 1, the major taxes of Texas. 2, establishing residence in Texas. 3, establishing business enterprises in Texas. 4, hiring a workforce in Texas. 5, raising a family in Texas. 6, getting settled in Texas. As you can see on these slides, the sky is blue, crystal blue. That is true with regards to Texas many days of the year. Texas is a sunshine state, bright state. And you see these buildings over here? It could be any place in Texas. Could be in the Dallas area or the suburbs. It can be in the Houston area, Harris County. It could be in Austin, Texas. It could be in San Antonio, Texas. Texas is full of wide open spaces and opportunities. As you can see from these buildings, there are residential buildings, business, office buildings, all reflecting the growth and the size and the opportunities and the diversity of Texas. Now, let us get started. The Texas Tax Code. This is, and we're speaking to lawyers here, so you can search in your legal search engine, the Texas Tax Code, and drill deeper into the areas that's on my slide. Since I only have 15 minutes, we're going to be going very rapidly. And it's going to be kind of like taking wheels and truss during the summer semester in 5 weeks. So I'm going to hit high points that I think you need to know about, and then you can drill deeper if you so desire by searching the Texas tax code. That's where you will find the specific types of taxes in Texas. The Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts is the chief tax administrator and tax collector in Texas. Glenn Haggard currently holds the office of Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts. For fiscal year 2021, the Texas Comptroller recently reported that Texas total tax revenue rose 7.1% in fiscal 2021 to $61.5 billion. So as we are traveling along this expressway, Texas is one of the lowest tax states in the nation. Look beyond what is right in front of you. Where is this tax revenue coming from? The opportunities in Texas. Where does revenue come from? Where does the Texas revenue come from? This is an adaptation of a report that the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts recently released. The $61.5 million total taxes, 58.6% comes from the limited sales, excise, and use taxes. So that's the first sign that you're going to see along this expressway as you contemplate traveling to Texas and you're on this highway. Texas is one of the lowest tax states in the country. The first sign you're going to see, and the first thing you need to know is Texas is financed primarily over 58% by sales and use tax. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the Texas limited sales, excise, and use tax, because it's a major way that Texas finances governmental functions. The next tax is 9.3%. So you see what I'm talking about, the difference, a drop from 58% to 9.3%. Motor vehicle sales and rental taxes. We're not going to talk about that tax in this presentation. But if you will Google or using your search engine, the Texas tax code, you can drill down on motor vehicle sales and rental taxes if you want to know more about that. The next tax is the 7.4% franchise tax. I do talk about that tax at length in my PowerPoint presentation, because it may not be as obvious what Texas means by Texas franchise tax. You may think that it's a company licensing a trademark or the right to work under its umbrella like a franchisee. That's not what this tax is about. And I'll explain later in this PowerPoint presentation a little bit more about what this tax is about. And then it falls down to 5.9% motor fuel taxes, 5.6% oil production tax. Some people think that Texas is driven by energy, but look at the 5.6% oil production tax, 2.6% natural gas production tax. Combined, they are like 8.2%. So look at the diversity in Texas in terms of industry. You can see that this is coming from various types of industries in the state of Texas. As you travel along this expressway, Texas is one of the lowest tax states in the nation. You see my attorney note down there. Texas does not have a personal income tax. So let's look at the Texas limited sales, excise, and use tax. Texas limited sales, excise, and use tax generates by far the most revenue for the state of Texas. Texas imposes a 6.25% sales and use tax on sales, leases, and rentals of touchable, movable property. Texas called that tangible personal property. And the 6.25% also is charged on specified services. Localities are allowed by law to impose up to a maximum of 2% sales and use tax on sales, leases, and rental of tangible personal property with respect to transactions within their jurisdictions. The maximum limited sales, excise, and use tax is 8.25%. That's the maximum sales tax, use tax allowed by law in the state of Texas. Now, the Texas limited sales, excise, and use tax is a complementary tax. What we mean by that is, it's like the flip side of the same coin. Heads is sales, tails is a use tax. Merchants in Texas have been deputized, if you will, by the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts as trustees for the state of Texas. This tax, this limited sales and excise tax, is paid by a purchaser, and the merchant is the trustee that required to turn over the tax, report the tax, and submit the tax to the Texas Comptroller's office periodically. Anyone coming to Texas to conduct a business subject to the Texas Limited Sales and Excise and Use Tax Act must obtain a sales tax permit from the Texas Comptroller's office. Now look at the, this is a grocery operator here. Food items in Texas is not subject, are exempt from the Texas sales tax. But let's say there's a pharmacy in the back of this store. Pharmaceuticals are exempt from the sales tax as well. Did you know, under Texas law, amounts charged for labor and services are not taxable in Texas unless they are specifically scheduled in tax code section 151.0101. In other words, taxable services has been codified by the legislature of Texas. Taxable services include 17 broad categories of services specifically set out in tax code section 151.0101 as follows. Amusement services. Number 2, cable television services. 3, personal services, such as this salon operator is designing her hair. The Texas legislature has designated some personal services as exempt from the Texas sales, use, and excise tax.
Coleman, I'm giving you the 1 minute warning on your 15 minutes.
Okay, let us move a little faster. Like I said, it's a lot to this presentation. And I'm glad I did the PowerPoint. I put more into this PowerPoint because I wanted to cover a lot of area. So let us move along here to, we're going to skip the franchise tax. Most businesses in Texas are not subject to the franchise tax, but still they have to file a franchise tax report if they're a certain category of businesses, okay? And then, so we're going to go down to another major tax in Texas along this highway is Texas has some of the highest property taxes in the United States. The average effective property tax rate in the Lone Star State is 1.69%, well above the national average, okay? Texas is a community property state. You can drill down on the differences by going to the Texas Property Code and looking for the differences between community property laws in California versus those in Texas. Driving and establishing a residence in Texas. Like I said, Texas is wide open spaces, and Texas is not known as a pedestrian-friendly state. So when you move to Texas, you need to convert your current valid driver's license within 90 days by going to the Texas Department of Public Safety. Establishing residence in Texas, you can establish residence by using these types of documents. They all have to be valid, like valid, unexpired Texas voter registration card, Texas motor vehicle registration or title, Texas boat registration or title, Texas concealed handgun license, You can use all of these to establish residence in Texas. Establishing residence in Texas for voting purposes, voter registration in Texas is county-based. So we encourage you to contact your county voter registrar. And I've listed their website, votetexas.gov. Establishing a business entity in Texas, that is all set out in the Texas Business Organization Code. And I've listed various types of businesses you can establish in Texas and advantages and disadvantages, sole proprietorship, general partnership, limited partnership, limited liability company, limited liability partnership. Any of this
All
sort.
right, we're like well over the 15 minutes and we have a
Okay,
few more people to go. So
I would just wrap up as I started, that if you need a copy of my presentation, you can either call us or write us or visit our website, www.cjacksonlaw.com. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about moving to Texas.
Yeah,
okay.
Texas is a big state, so maybe you need more time, I guess. Okay.
You know, sales tax alone could take 8 hours.
Did you pick a song, by the way?
I did, and it's Amarillo by Morning by George Strait.
Oh, very good. Okay. Yeah, the song list is in the back of the materials, by the way. So somebody want to put up my slide deck, please? The Wyoming set. There we go. Okay, I have to figure out where this sign was located, but it's obviously some highway coming into Wyoming. The question here, when you talk about moving to Wyoming, is where, which is our next slide. If you move that, please. And then we have a map coming up. So I don't know if you can read all this, but I have a curated list of towns. I've lived in one of them, and the other ones I've spent some considerable time in. Up in the upper left-hand corner, just below Yellowstone Park, there is Jackson, Wyoming. Some people call it Jackson Hole, which is really the valley, but not the city. And then kind of going to the right there, it's keeping to the right of Yellowstone Park, you find Cody, which is famous because it's named after Buffalo Bill. And go a little further, you find Sheridan. And to me, that's the best places in Wyoming to live, although most people in Wyoming, which is not very many, live in kind of the southern tier or the lower part of Wyoming, which is this at least it comes out on a flat map as a rectangular area. It's actually on a globe, so it's not really a rectangle. So let's go to the next slide. It's just my curated choices of places to live in Wyoming. We'll see some other information later. Let's go to the next slide. This is a typical day in Wyoming, lots of snow. And this is not that far from Jackson. There are a lot of clouds, by the way, and we'll get to climate in a moment. So let's go to the tax regimes, which is slide 7. This is an easy part usually. No personal income tax, no corporate tax, no film incentives, by the way, which is unusual. I mean, we've had them, Wyoming's had them in the past, but they don't currently have a set. There's proposals to kind of restore their film incentive program, but they don't have one currently. So I think the Yellowstone, I can't remember what streaming service is on, but that was actually not filmed in Nevada and in Wyoming because there wasn't any film incentives. Go to the next one here. We do have a license tax. You can kind of figure it out. It's a very small amount on the value of assets located in Wyoming. It's only for corporate holdings and LLC holdings. Most of Wyoming taxes are connected through the severance tax, which I put down there at the bottom. Next is the sales tax. Sales tax rate is the highest is 6%. There's a state rate and there's a local rate that goes on top. So I put Teton County, which is where slide 9, which is where Jackson is located. Property taxes, I'll give you the formula. It comes out to be very low because they start off with assessed value and you take 9.5% of fair market value, which then becomes assessed value, and you multiply it times the tax rate. So it becomes quite a small amount, although home prices in Jackson are quite high. They're actually maybe almost comparable to California. Go to the next slide. These are just ways you could establish residency in Wyoming. It would not be necessarily controlling for California purposes, but all of these various methods, which I won't go through, but are in the slides, require you establish California, Wyoming residency, or sometimes domicile. And I'll leave you to look at those, and we'll skip through all of those particular methods. The homestead declaration, which is on slide 21, that's an exemption in bankruptcy. You can file a declaration of homestead. It's kind of a self-serving statement, but it would be some maybe relevant evidence. Let's go next to the next slide on slide 22. These are just some laws that you might find of interest. And I want to go through some of these. The first one is our entities and trusts. Nevada has, slide 23, Nevada, unlike Nevada, we have foundations, which is only one other state has foundations. They're like civil law foundations, no owners, and beneficiaries have limited rights. We have these decentralized autonomous organizations, which the people in the virtual currency and NFT areas like space like to use. Of course, we have our trust law, and we'll talk about a little bit, and private trust companies with no capital requirements. Let me skip to the trust rules, which is slide, I think it's slide 32. Yeah, the trust code. Here we have the uniform trust code, which means that the trust law, all the stuff that we may have taken in law school, we actually had a trust course in our law school, but I think not too many schools have a separate trust course anymore. But anyway, all those case laws is mostly codified in the uniform trust code, which a number of states have, including Wyoming, which you can also have changes in the various jurisdictions. We have a perpetuity period of 1,000 years, except for real property, which you can get a longer perpetuity period if you want by putting that into an LLC and having it held by the individual or a trust. We have spendthrift protection, directed trust. We have specific provisions for trust protectors, and we have purpose trusts, which are not found in a lot of states, which is an interesting vehicle to use. The next slide talks about private trust companies. The important thing here is you just file a copy of your organizational documents to the Secretary of State, gets approved, and then that's it. Basically, there's no regulation, no capital requirements, and it's a comfortable way for some people to set up trusts without having to use a commercial trust company. Marital property law. We don't have, in Wyoming, we don't have community property. We have separate property and something called marital property, which kind of acts like community property, but only on divorce, where there's an equitable division, which means it's not 50-50, but it depends on the circumstances, how long the people have been married and the contributions of the various spouses. I'll skip over inheritance law, digital assets. Wyoming's been trying to attract people in the digital asset space. And so we have a special law that treats digital assets as property. I put in the highway speed limits. So we've got 80 miles an hour. It's a little low for your Lamborghini and Ferrari, but it is a fairly high speed limit. And so I put that in there. We have open and concealed carry laws, which are very liberal. I won't get into those, but people are into that. You can certainly carry your gun around in Wyoming. The next slide here on slide 39, there is a federal requirement of disclosing the ownership of real property in certain geographical areas, some in California, some in Florida, but none of these areas are in Wyoming, though Jackson probably should be picked up as an area that's been ignored. We have rights of privacy and publicity to discuss on slide 40. A little bit on 641 is starting a business. I looked at bar admission. I was admitted by reciprocity from California. That's or excuse me, on motion. Now they require, Wyoming requires reciprocity, which California doesn't provide. So that's a little more difficult to get into Wyoming's bar from California. You have to take basically the bar. We're a right to work state. The minimum wage is the same as the federal wage. Cannabis is still illegal. It is under federal law, so there's nothing like in Colorado or even in California. So if you're into that area of business, if you will, or even for recreation, Wyoming's not the place for you. Let's go to other factors here. Let me find where we want to go. I'm skipping through these slides. Slide 51. Yeah, these are some other factors to consider. I'll just wind up with some of these things. Wyoming just really is a state of small towns, as we'll see in a minute. Or some people look at it as a small town with a lot of long streets. Like, one town with just a lot of highways going in and out of the towns. So we've got in the next slide, on slide 52, we've got the population. So this biggest city in Wyoming is Cheyenne. It logs in at 62,000 or so. And you can see that my curated cities of Sheridan, Jackson, and Cody are respectively 18,000, 10,000, and 9,000. I put in the next slide here, the median home prices. I don't quite understand. I get the prices for Sheridan and Cody, but if you go onto the website in Jackson, I can't find a house for 652,000. Actually, I can't even find a house for less. It's listed on in any of the photos of less than $1.5 million or $1.6 million. So houses are quite expensive in Jackson, but somehow that's the median price. Next slide shows some of your neighbors. This is a bull moose. When I lived in Jackson, there were mooses that they like to spend time in the riverbed, which apparently is where they find where they graze. There's other wildlife you might find as well, depending on where you live, but grizzly bears, for instance, which are not the friendliest animal as well. Here's the climate in slide 53. If you look at the average low, this is in Jackson, Wyoming. The average low in January is the average. So it's 6 in January and 8 in February. And you can see that I guess the high gets up to, on average, gets up to as high as 74. So what you have is long winters, muddy springs, and very cold falls. So you got about 2 months of summer, which is beautiful, but the rest of the year is, unless you're skiing, is not so good. Politics is the next one here. It's a Republican state. Teton County, where Jackson's located, is surprisingly Democratic by a few hundred votes, as you can see there, a few hundred voters. Airline connections is a kind of, it's the next slide. You can come in and out of Wyoming, but it's hard to move within Wyoming by airline. So if you're going from Jackson to Sheridan, you go through Denver, for instance. So everything goes through Denver or Salt Lake City. There's not even flights to Billings, which is not that far from Sheridan. Next is the newspapers. These are the daily newspapers. I tried to find out if the New York Times could be found. I couldn't find it on the website. I'm not sure if you can get it anywhere, but it may be in some of the major hotels. I'm not sure. Anyway, the leading newspaper, which is statewide, is the Casper Star Tribune, which is at 28,000 circulation daily. And you can see the other ones that are there. That's
Bill,
basic.
I'm giving you the 1 minute warning.
That's good because I can make it. Thank you. Okay, go to the next one, which is the university. We got one university. There's a small college. It's a private college. It's if you look in the U.S. News and World Report, it's quite a ways down the list. And the tuition is quite inexpensive, $2,400 a semester for undergraduate. Law a little bit more, $8,722. People worry about healthcare. There are hospitals in Wyoming, basically in all of these, you want to call them major towns. I put the 3 that I selected. Then cultural opportunities, which is the big thing in Wyoming. And we've got them. Rodeos, Division I sports in Wyoming. They don't usually do so well in football. There's a symphony, orchestra, opera, ballet, etc. And some art museums, which generally specialize in Western art. Next one is, I think it's almost finishing up here. No, one more. Shopping. Well, depending on how you define a mall, there's either 0, 2, or 4 malls in the state. And I've got the location there. There's one Whole Foods market. And that's always the problem. When you go to the grocery store, it's a little bit of a shock. Unless you can, find the Whole Foods market. When I was living there was not a Whole Foods market. I don't work for Whole Foods, but I won't say what the other grocery store was, but the selection was not the greatest. And then I put a new final slide here, which is charging stations. I don't know how many electric cars are registered there, but it must be quite a few. We've got 59 charging stations and 17 in Jackson. So there must be quite a few electric cars there, but only a couple in Cody and 3 in Sheridan. So if you've got an electric car, you may have to carefully plan your trips. Okay, with that, that's my presentation on Wyoming. I think the downsides are small town living, if you don't like that, and the weather, which is generally not good except for 2 months in the summer. And you contrast that with beautiful scenery, skiing and hiking. Job-wise, it's usually you have to work remotely. Professional practice would take a little while to develop. So thank you. And we're going to move to what we got, Florida, right? Yes. So we're going to Alan Gassman and his associate, I think, will take it from here.
Okay. Very good. Welcome to Florida. We used to have mooses, but the alligators ate them all. Now, when you move to Florida, when you find an alligator on your porch, which happens quite often, grab it by the tail, not by the mouth. And then walk around, walk around, walk around. He gets dizzy. You turn him over, and then he'll fall asleep, wrap his mouth in tape. Always have duct tape around for that. It's not really duct tape, it's alligator tape. We use different type of tapes for the ducks here. and then turn him over to animal control so they can let him out peacefully. So that's the first thing you need to know about moving to Florida. By the way, there's a really good video that you can watch on YouTube about how the northeastern states view people who move to the non-tax jurisdictions with Jonathan Blotmacher. So I just have it there for your reference. My favorite Florida song, God's Own Drunk by Jimmy Buffett, with the quote, "I was only going out to get the paper. The next thing I knew, I was on I-75 heading for Florida, and I never came back." And a lot of people come here and they visit Mickey Mouse, they visit the Kennedy Space Center, they visit Miami, and they never go back. Buddy Ebsen was from Florida, went to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, before he became the ultimate Beverly hillbilly. Now, one thing to know about Florida is that you have a lot of choices as to what type of culture you want to live in. So up towards Georgia, it's a lot like Georgia. It is very southern. It is very hospitable. It is colder in the winter. Our capital is in Tallahassee, where people are very friendly, but also very bureaucratic. And if you want to get something done in Tallahassee, hire a lawyer in Tallahassee, preferably with a southern accent. Don't try to do that yourself with your northern accent. People who moved to Florida over the decades would come down I-95 from New York, and they would keep going until they got down to Miami. So Miami, Fort Lauderdale is almost like the sixth borough of New York, with a lot of Spanish influence because of a lot of people from South America and Central America and Cuba have moved there. It's a beautiful mixed up city with 6 million people. Then a certain percentage of people who come to see Mickey Mouse land in Orlando, up now at 2 million. I'm in the Tampa Bay area with 3 million people. So not nearly as concentrated as your LA or your San Francisco. One of the wealthiest and most beautiful cities in the country, Naples on the West Coast. Now, people who came from the middle of America to see Florida, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, they came down I-75 and they settled the West Coast. So the West Coast is a lot calmer personality-wise than the East Coast. If you're coming to Florida, yes, you can go through a major airport, Jacksonville, Orlando, Miami. Or if you come through the Atlanta airport, which is the biggest airport in the world, you can fly into any of these cities. So if you're going to see a client, or you want to go to Melbourne, or you want to go to New Smyrna, go ahead and see what's available through usually Delta or Southwest through Atlanta. And that Atlanta airport, it never takes you more than 15 minutes to get from any terminal to any other terminal. Want to be a Floridian? We're glad to have you as a Floridian. We don't care if you have a driver's license. We don't care when you got here. You say you're a Floridian, you're a Floridian. Pay us $400 to convert your car to Florida, get a driver's license, start drinking rum, whatever it takes. Tell your family you moved to Florida. That's all we hear. I do have a checklist here, but mainly just tell everyone on Facebook that you moved to Florida, and we will be glad to believe you. I have a Florida compliance calendar. And so when your client moves to Florida, don't visit them June through November if you don't like hurricanes. But if you want to send your mother-in-law or your father-in-law on a cruise, the rates go down between June and November, and you may never see them again. So you can consider that. Tom Petty's birthday, October 20, 2022. He was with us before he went to California. Vehicle tag renewal on your birthday. If you drive with an expired tag, it is a felony, F-E-L-O-N-Y, punishable by more than 1 year in prison. So that is your Florida calendar. The unauthorized practice of law rules in Florida are very hospitable for a California lawyer. You can practice law for your clients in California, as long as the client has arisen out of your California practice and you do not hold yourself out as having a Florida office. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to go to court unless you get sworn in pro hac vice. But if you have 10 or 15 really good clients that move to Florida, you do not need to be a member of the Florida bar to come here and visit them in their home and take care of their business. And of course, it's smarter to get a Florida lawyer to help you because we have some strange laws. But this is permitted. And if you are in Florida and doing work for your California clients and are not a member of the Florida bar, that's okay too. That's all right also. So that would be one reason that you might want your clients to move to Florida. As with the other states, the only income tax we have in Florida is for a C corporation. It's a 5.5% tax, but as you know, it's deductible against the federal tax. We don't have any individual tax, partnership tax, S corporation tax, estate tax, none of that. Our sales tax is generally 7% on the sale of a lot of things, but not on everything. We are not a community property state, but we have adopted the Uniform Act that if your client comes here with your California community property and wishes to have it replicate community property for a stepped up basis on the first death, they can do that. But more often, we will have them transmute out of community property because I'm concerned about creditor protection. That if one spouse dies, one spouse gets sued and it's community property, you know, if it's California community property, it's all at risk. So quite typically when they move to Florida, I specifically will have them transmute out. It's certainly something to think about, but we do have a community property trust law in Florida, just like Alaska, Kentucky, and Tennessee, which will allow your client to even accumulate new assets in Florida during the marriage in a Florida community property trust. The only real requirement is you need to follow our community property trust law and have a Florida trustee. But what we do have that you don't have is tenancy by the entireties. So Wyoming has this also. Both Florida and Wyoming law provides that just about anything that my wife and I can own can be titled as tenants by the entireties. So if one of us is sued, they can't take any of it. So we could have a large bank account, an LLC, our home owned as tenancy by the entireties. A big judgment comes down against me. They cannot touch the tenancy by the entireties assets. I could file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and lose none of those tenancy by the entireties assets. So that's a big reason and a big difference between Florida and California. Now, we have some surprisingly strong creditor protection rules. And this is why O.J. Simpson and many other notorious people live in Florida, because our Constitution says that if you buy a homestead in Florida, up to half an acre if you're within the city limits, up to 160 acres outside of the city limits, and you do it for the express purpose of avoiding a creditor, that is perfectly okay. There's nothing that creditor can do. So that's why people regularly move to Naples, where you can get a 1/4 acre right on the water for $10 million, and nobody's going to be able to reach into that property unless it's a government creditor, unless it's what we call a super creditor under the federal statute. Assuming, though, that you purchase that home with clean money. If you purchase that home with the product of a tort, for example, I ripped off a bunch of people and made $10 million, and I'm going to buy a home with the $10 million, that could be set aside. But if you buy it with clean money, it's going to be creditor protected unless they can force you into bankruptcy, but there's ways to stay out of bankruptcy. We have unlimited creditor protection for IRAs, for permanent life insurance, for pension accounts, for tenancy by the entireties, for 529 plans, for annuity contracts, for wages of the head of household. So, and we also, like Wyoming and like Nevada, have charging order protection for LLCs. In California, a judgment creditor can latch on to your LLC interest and foreclose on it, become an LLC member, whether you want them or not. Not in Florida, not in Wyoming, not in Nevada. So a lot of clients will have multi-member LLCs instead of single member LLCs. Your Florida LLC can be renewed every year for $135 a year, not $800 a year like California. So when your clients move to Florida, they can merge their California, they can move their California companies to Florida or to Wyoming or to Nevada to get a much lower annual cost. Now, on the homestead, besides the creditor protection, the property tax here is always just under 2% of the tax assessed value, and the tax assessed value generally at this time is about 85%, 75 to 85% of the fair market value of the property. Properties are going through the roof here compared to what they were before, but they're nowhere near what they cost in California. I know that's very specific for you. We have, as soon as your client gets here, they need to move in by December 31st and own the property. And then by February 28th, they need to register to make the Florida homestead exemption apply. And that is where they will say, under penalty of perjury, I actually live here. Please don't increase the value, the appraised value of my homestead by more than 3% a year, or CPI, whichever is greater. So that's a real good value. And if you sell your homestead in Florida and buy another one, you can port that estate, I mean the property tax savings portion of it. So the homestead tax exemption in Florida is different than the creditor exemption. Just make sure that you understand those rules. Don't get them confused. Similar to the California reassessment issue, we have for non-homestead a 10% annual increase cap. So if I own an apartment building, or I have a vacation home or a vacant lot here, and it goes up in value by 30% or 40%, which is what happened in 2020 and 2021, the property appraiser still cannot increase it by more than 10% a year, and they'll just keep cranking it up by 10% a year until it gets to that amount. So we have to be very careful here when we move property from personal names to an LLC, or it's in an LLC and we transfer more than 50% of the LLC, or if it's in one spouse's name and it gets transferred to the other spouse's name, that can blow open the 10% cap. So you have to be careful when you transfer property in Florida. Now, you may be saying to me, yes.
I'm giving you the 1 minute, your 1 minute warning.
Okay, great. When you do a Cupert in Florida, at the end of the Cupert term, during the Cupert term, you'll keep your homestead exemption. At the end of the Cupert term, if you enter into a 98-year or longer lease between the grantor and the Cupert, then you can keep the homestead exemption. When a spouse dies and the homestead goes into the credit shelter trust, if the credit shelter trust has the right language, you can keep your homestead exemption. And the property appraisers in Florida answer the phone, and they're friendly, and they will give you a written opinion in advance to help assure you that you can keep that homestead exemption. The last thing I'll say, with 20 seconds left here, which I know for many attendees is 3/10 of a billable hour, is consider the JEST, the Joint Exempt Step Up Trust. It is commonly used now in Florida. So my client, even if they live in California, they transmute out of community property, they put the asset in the JEST trust. When the first spouse dies, you get a full step up in basis if you properly draft and administer the JEST trust. And all the assets in the JEST trust up to the $12,060,000 can go into the credit shelter trust. So if your clients are leaving California and you want to replicate your community property estate plan, get that step up and fund even more than half of the assets into a credit shelter trust, consider the JEST. If you have any questions, you do have my email address here. I'll be glad to answer it. Thank you very much for letting me participate in this program.
Okay, and Howard, you're up on the final piece of this, which is actually exiting California.
Terrific. Thank you. In terms of songs, I have three. We Got to Get Out of This Place by the Animals, Leaving on a Jet Plane by Peter, Paul, and Mary, and the song that you absolutely do not want to have is Leave Your Heart in San Francisco. If you were to leave your heart in San Francisco, you might never terminate your California residence. So you got to take that with you. California is an ugly place in terms of taxes. It's 13.3% on all income earned by residents, and non-residents are taxed on income from the state. So if you end up leaving California, you got to get your sources of income and take them away with you as well. California has an insatiable appetite to spend, and not very intelligently. So in the future, we're going to see probably more tax increases. Interestingly, only about the top 1% of taxpayers produced 45% of the income tax revenue in 2016. So it's a very small portion slice of people that pay the tax. And if the Silicon Valley folks, the high-tech entrepreneurs, leave California, we can be in a world of hurt. Okay. California, what is residency? It's an absurd definition without a lot of detail. The statute effectively says, as long as you're in California for other than a temporary or transitory purpose, and none of those terms are really well defined. California often talks about the concept of residency, but they don't mean residency. The statute and the case laws all really truly mean domicile. Where is your heart? Where do you intend to live? Where, when you leave, do you want to come back? So the baseball player who leaves California for a 5 or a 10-year contract with a team in Milwaukee or Florida and comes back to California, they might not consider him as ever having left the state. That's always a problem. Everybody's heard of the presumption. Well, if you're here less than 6 months, you're not a California resident. That is not a presumption for leaving California. It's a presumption if you come here to California and are here less than 6 months, once you've established residency, actually domicile, outside of the state of California. So that presumption doesn't help. There's a tiny, narrow presumption if you're out of the state for 18 consecutive months on an employment-related matter and come back no more than 45 days on vacation, you will be deemed to have left California. But you can't have earned more than $200,000 a year in intangible income. That's rents, royalties, dividends, etc. And the principal purpose of your leaving cannot be tax avoidance. So if you're going to leave California for 18 months on a quote work-related basis, cash out a big stock holding and come back, California is likely to challenge it on the avoidance. Federal tax, the State Board of Equalization, Franchise Tax Board, really treat you as being a resident until you truly leave the state and leave everything behind. I can't tell you how many of my clients try and play the game of they'll never find me. Nonsense. Between car phones, cell phones, GPS tracking, social media, it's almost impossible to live somewhere, get a nominal house somewhere or apartment and stay in California and say they'll never figure it out. They will. In the materials, which will be forthcoming to you, is an outline that was prepared back in 2019, which detailed the laws of leaving California. And it has several great checklists. And with some modesty, I say they're great because in large part, they were prepared by Bill Norman and several others. And I just pulled them together. But there are three things to consider. What do you do when you're leaving? How do you tie it up with a bow and say, I'm out of here? How do you establish residence where you're going? As a couple of our speakers said, they have declarations, things that you could do as soon as you get somewhere. And then what do you do when you want to come back to California and visit? The leaving and establishing are often two sides of the same coin. You want to take your car and change the license and registration. So you want to terminate California, go to DMV, get rid of it, get to the new state, register, driver's license. Obviously dwelling, make sure that where you're moving, you have a pretty grand place. Don't go from, 12,000 foot house on 10 acres in Bel Air and get yourself a 1-bedroom apartment in Naples, Florida. Just doesn't look right. Unless you have some other reasons why you're downscaling. Don't leave any personal possessions in California. I had a client years ago, went to the Middle East on a long-term employment contract. It was an indefinite contract, rented out the house and left his 36-foot boat behind for the use of my law firm. It was very nice to have access to a 36-foot Erickson. The state said, wait a minute, look at all these assets he has here. He didn't buy a big fancy home in the Middle East. He's coming back here. So get your furnishings out of the state. Don't store them here. Store them wherever you're moving. Close down those banks, the brokerage accounts. Get rid of the safe deposit box. If you're a member of clubs, best to get rid of your club memberships, your church memberships. Maybe if you really need, keep an out-of-state membership. Several clubs have those kind of arrangements. My inclination is, at least for the first couple of years, get rid of them. Notify everybody and anybody, your credit card companies, your frequent flyers, your auto rental clubs. Don't be stupid and say you're moving out of California, wink, wink, and then have an extensive social media presence of all the great activities you're doing in Malibu. Don't be boasting about what you're doing and how you're cheating the government. Friends turned into enemies will turn around and nail you. Be consistent. You move someplace, start making friends, get involved in the community. If you're going to come back to California on vacation, have a round trip ticket if you're flying here. Stay in a hotel or an Airbnb. Keep it on the short term. So if you're here for 30 days, fine, but keep some records as to what you do. Make sure wherever you're moving to, you have a local doctor, lawyers, accountants, so that you're integrating into the communities. If you do all this, you've got a real good chance of being able to nail both the termination of California residents and the establishment of new residents elsewhere. A simple test that Rufus Rhodes, a legendary tax lawyer, once taught me about residents. He says, pull out that wallet, take a look at the cards in there, the credit cards, the driver's license, the business cards that you might be holding on to. And that's just one of those simple tests as to where you're residing, where your heart is. There's a California federal FTB publication, 1031. called Guidelines for Determining Residence Status, a great publication. There are lots of good reasons to leave California. There are becoming less and less reasons to stay. They tend to be very personal. Typically, my case, for example, the family's all here, so I'm not going to be leaving anywhere soon. I'm not a fan of cold weather. When you look at the price of homes in Jackson Hole and you look at how much it costs per nice day of weather, as Bill said, there's 3 nice months a year, very, very expensive, as where the other states we've been talking about are relatively cheap when you consider how many great days they all have. And with that, we're open for questions. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have a few questions in the Q&A. So there's one question about if you're licensed in California, how easy is it to get reciprocity in these states? That we does anyone know that answer?
Yeah, we can talk about that. I already mentioned in Wyoming, it would be very difficult because they don't have reciprocity. I guess, Coleman, I don't know if you looked at it or not, but I think I looked at it and there seems to be reciprocity in Texas if you have a certain period of time of practice and you take a course in Texas law. It's not really a bar requirement. A bar test. You just have to take a CLE course, I think. Florida, I think, is a difficult state as well. I don't know, Alan, do you know?
I don't think we have any reciprocity.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to take the bar. So
I think in Texas, you have to have reciprocity in the state that you're coming from. That state would have to have reciprocity, I believe.
yeah, I think okay. I'll leave it to you, obviously. I was trying to look at it. I thought you didn't need it if you had a certain number of years of practice.
Now, the good news is in most of these states, you can practice law, federal law, probably without being a member of the local bar.
That's correct.
That's, for example, the rule in California. So if I lived in Austin and did nothing but federal tax litigation and federal tax planning, and then you got a question of what is practice of law anyways these days with accountants and insurance salesmen and everybody else doing estate planning documents. CPA firms routinely do them. And then you get a local lawyer to go wink, wink, and approve them. You probably have a fair amount of flexibility. But again, that's one of those things that might show you're still a California resident if you're relying on your California license for your source of income.
Yeah. You might become a consultant. That's a possibility, as long as you don't just say you're a lawyer. That may be illegal in most states.
Okay, and this question is for Matthew. Do you have the citation to the statute for the residency affidavit?
NRS 41.191. Nevada Revised Statutes 41.191, Declaration of Domicile, Nevada.
Thank you. Okay, so Ernest, I hope you got that. Okay, next question. Let's see. Okay, I don't know which state this was directed at. What percentage of the state bar are minority members? This was from Richard, and he asked it around 107. So I think that may have been Coleman when you were talking.
Okay.
I am not sure with regards to the answer to that question. Increasingly, and it depends upon what he means by minority members. He's talking about racial. Is he talking about nationality? Is he talking about women? Increasingly, I mean, in our law firm, we have 3 women lawyers. We have 2.
Oh, wait, it's specified now, African Americans.
I don't know the percentage with regards to the number of African Americans lawyers in the state of Texas. All I know is that I am bringing on an African American female into my law firm as soon as she passes the July bar exam. But that's not something that I personally check on. I do see Texas, again, as a wide a state with many opportunities. I've spent my entire adult career in Texas. And I think Texas law schools are trying to increase opportunities for minority lawyers, and even the Texas bar has a particular section for minority lawyers.
Okay, thank you. All right, and this is a question from Robert Briskin. Historically, this is directed to Alan. Why does Florida encourage bum deadbeat debtors to move to Florida? Explain how these people improve your state and its finances. I don't know if you if that goes beyond the scope of what you've discussed, or if you want to answer that.
No, some of my best friends are deadbeats. I'll address that. So back before air conditioning, it was hard to get people to move to Florida. And what Florida did in the 1800s was say, we don't care if you owe people money, come down and you'll get a free 40 acres that you can farm and you can start over. And since then, Florida has had a proud tradition of allowing families not to become destitute because of a car accident or because of a recession or because of aggressive lenders, so that we don't have, you know, we are a fresh start state. I will say that.
Okay, thank you. All right, and this question is from Gregory Crawford, and I think this is directed toward Howard. Many clients wish to leave California for tax purposes, but keep a condo or other property in the Golden State to visit. Is that at all possible in any scenario?
Not if you want to escape California successfully, it's not. I mean, keeping a condo here just indicates that you've never really given up your domicile. The concept of domicile is, like I said, it's where your heart is. So you could be physically out of California for a long period of time, but if you're showing this is where you want to spend time, this is where you want to come back to, such that you want to have a permanent place here, it's real tough. If you did a lot of good planning and really cut all ties, but you kept the place, you rented it out most of the year, and you used it 2 months a year, a month and a half a year, probably fine. A lot depends on the nature of your income, the source of income, how wealthy you are. You know, if you were going to be leaving California and a year or two later sell your investments and, you know, generate a substantial amount of income, probably wouldn't do it. There are halfway measures. There are things like wings, dings, and nings, which you could use, which kind of somewhat get you out of the state, where you could set up a non-California trust for your non-California assets and escape California tax on them, and hold on to them for a while and let them grow with tax-free of California. So there's some planning opportunities, but I'd be reticent with a condo. Maybe give it to the kids now, use up part of that exemption, and then lease it from them or rent it, you know, for the month or so you want to come back.
Okay, thank you. And one last comment from Bruce Givner, who says, Howard, why isn't your favorite song Hotel California? You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. And on that cheery note, I want to thank all of our presenters for this program. It was really great. Lots of material to take in and lots of things to think about. So thank you. If you are interested in becoming active in the tax section, we meet on the, let me get this right, the morning of the third Thursday of every month at 8:30 a.m. To 9:30 a.m. It's a Zoom meeting. So we'd love to see you there. If you have ideas for programs, please come and join us. And next month on June 2nd, we're going to have a program with Professor Phyllis Tate, who's a law professor, who will be discussing tax law through a social justice lens. Thanks again, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.